Welcome to a radical discussion of independence, free will, liberty, and the left-hand path. This is Daimonosophy 2.0 with your host, Paul Frederick.
No vision can grasp.
All right, looks like we're going. Looks like we're live.
Right on.
Jessica Hall.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, Jessica Hall, so everyone knows, recently made a short documentary film called Left Hand Path, which won first prize in its category at the International Hermetic Film Festival in Venice, 2017. And this is the first time that Jessica and I have spoken before, really. And the reason we're talking is because we had a mutual friend named James Kirby, who was also the subject of this film. Am I right so far?
Oh, you're yes, of course.
Spot on? All right. Good deal.
Spot on.
Good deal. So, I know some people listening to my show will know who James Kirby is and already have a perspective on that, and maybe even seen the film. So why don't we back up, and maybe you could tell me how you first came to know James Kirby.
Well, back in the 90s, James owned and operated one of the largest, in Western Canada, I think, possibly even in Canada, the largest occult bookstores. And it was in this alley behind Main Street in Whitehorse, Yukon, so northern Canada, very strange place. And I used to go there with my sister. And he shared a space with an apothecary called Pure Essence, and it was quite fun, as teenage girls, to go in and pick up the witch's almanac and get candles and incense. But James was great because he treated us like we were equals, like we were adults. And it was really unusual for teenagers to get that at the time anyway. I was always blown away that this, very important businessman would talk to me and explain things. And I could ask the most, what I'd think is the stupidest question, and he'd make me feel okay about it. And, and he'd spend time with us, even though we didn't spend that much money at his store. So I always thank him for that he'd always give us the time we needed, and we always left feeling good about ourselves. And so that's how I got to know James originally.
Wow, that's intense, because I remember hearing about this bookstore. I mean, that whole bookstore thing that he did is kind of legendary now. So it's interesting for me to talk to someone who, you were a part of that. You're a part of that whole thing and saw it all happen.
What's really interesting is the amount of people who have the same kind of story I have. That after I screened the film, James passed on, and I had a bunch of people in the Whitehorse screening come up and tell me, oh, well, I got this book there, and he taught me about this, and he sent me on this direction and that direction. And they were all from different walks of life, different religious backgrounds, some of them were into magic stuff, some of them weren't, but they all had the same kind of story about James and how he made them feel, and how, how that bookstore really helped them find something in their lives. So that was really pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a true 90s story.
Yeah.
So, so you met him in the 90s, and so, were you friends? Did you maintain contact with him throughout, all that time period over the decades?
Well, I was a teenager at the time, so a couple of years he moved away. Okay. And when he moved away, I ended up meeting this woman who later on became his partner, his final partner, and she was actually a friend of mine. And so when they both decided to move back to Whitehorse, they met outside of Whitehorse, and they both decided to move back to Whitehorse. She's like, this is the guy I'm dating, and it's like, oh my God, it's James. So that's kind of fun how, it's a small world here in Whitehorse, but the fact that two people from Whitehorse would find each other in a big city, and then come back, and they both were connected to me from the same time frame. It's kind of neat, because I met her the same year I met James, but they didn't meet each other in Whitehorse, so.
Wow.
So yeah.
No, that's amazing too, because I know Whitehorse, how big of a town what's the population of Whitehorse?
Well, at the time, back then, it was like 25,000. It's now almost 30, I think. I could be wrong, but it's roughly around there, 30,000. So it's not big at all.
It's amazing because I've met so many people from Whitehorse since, well, over the last couple of years. And all of it's because all of it goes back to James Kirby, of course. So it's really interesting. It's like kind of like, I don't know, he's kind of shined a little glitter of stardom on this one little town, is like achieving a certain sort of I guess underground, sinister kind of notoriety.
Well, I wouldn't actually call it sinister necessarily, but definitely a different type of notoriety for sure. Definitely off the main path, definitely on a different path. So yeah.
Right. And I mean sinister in the sense of left-hand path, sort of underground.
Yeah, I guess.
Rather than anything nefarious. But okay, so you knew James Kirby over the years, and you stayed in touch and are reconnected. How does the film thing come into it? Are you a filmmaker by trade?
Yeah, I mean, I've been making films for many years. So sometimes I work, in the field doing promotional or paid kind of gigs, and sometimes I make my own stuff. So it all depends. It's a small community here, so you can't necessarily do it full time, but I've managed to do it quite a lot in the last little bit. But I was actually working on a documentary as a researcher, a documentary out of Toronto as a researcher, and they were looking for people who were eccentric. That was the description I was given. And so I asked Claire if James would be offended if I asked him if he would consider me asking questions for this documentary to potentially be a subject. And she said no, he'd be delighted. And so I called him up, and he invited me over, and we did this hour-long interview, and he toured me around the space, which is kind of the final home he had built, and because he had this other space downtown Whitehorse, which is awesome. But anyway, this is a little bit later, and then so he said yes, and I did it. I sent the interview to the director, and the director loved James. He thought, oh my God, James is so personable, so amazing on film, except he's way too rational for our project. So that was that. I always thought that was really funny that, because at the time I had my own perceived bias on things. And then I sat down and talked to James, and I'm like, wait, he might not be right for this. And then the director's like, no, he's not, because what he's talking about is, is rational. It's not on the level that they were looking at for that project, for that. And I think it ended up having like really strange people, like a guy who thought he was a mermaid and things like that. So yeah, James was not ready for that project, but he liked the experience of being interviewed, and he really wanted to tell his story. He really wanted to kind of, in a sense, out himself to the world as a Setian, and so I always had that in the back of my mind, that James was interested in doing a project together. And so a few years later, there was a competition. Our local film festival had a competition with a really, really big prize pot for pitching. So I decided to pitch the story, pitch a documentary about James, with his permission, of course. And so I did that. I was really afraid of public speaking at the time. And it was my New Year's resolution to speak in public once that year. And so I thought, this is it. I'll do that. Then it's off my list and I'm done. But then I won. So I got all the funding I needed to make this film. And then we moved forward and we made the film. So that was pretty awesome.
Wow. So there was previously then, before your film, you'd pitched it to another director and they passed on it? No? What?
No, I was hired to find people for this director for a project that he was doing.
Okay, gotcha.
And I just pitched James as a potential person, but he was passed because the director was actually like, I actually believe in almost everything he's talking about. That's kind of long, so he might actually, belong to the community without, I have no idea. He never really expanded on that, but yeah, so that's where I actually started thinking about what it meant, what, to be eccentric, what that meant, but also what James was about, what his philosophy was, what his practice was, and really started to try and understand it, because I didn't really understand it beforehand. And that's the thing, knowledge is knowledge is power. And it just took me a while to kind of get through and go, oh, that's what that is. It's not this, it's that. And it's not as scary as I thought it was. It's not as, so it's interesting going through this process yeah.
No, that's really interesting. So that director, though, then they passed on it because it was too rational.
Yeah.
So that's very, very interesting to hear that. And it is. I mean, I agree. It's very rational. And I'm a SETI and I subscribe to a lot of the elements of the philosophy, and it is like a very rational thing, and it tends to attract those kinds of people. But that's the thing I'll say about the film Left Hand Path, which I've gotten to see it a couple of times now, is that it is very rational, and I think it is probably the best film portrayal of Setian ideas that really exists out there.
Well, thank you.
So
thank you.
Yeah, so definitely I have to say good job.
That actually means quite a bit, because I spent a lot of time in the research, like of course James in the pre-production and research stage, but in the editing stage I was really, really careful, because I wanted to make sure that that I didn't put the wrong image in the wrong spot, and there's a couple little Easter eggs in there, and it's all based on what I learned through James and through the research I did. I really wanted to make sure that it was a fair representation, and that I wasn't throwing any bias into it, that I wasn't coming at it. Because when I was looking online for projects that of similar nature, they're all of the documentaries I saw kind of side-eyed the subject. So, here's the Luciferian, weirdo, huh? Or here's this person, and this is what they do, but the whole thing would be kind of a joke, or the director wouldn't take them seriously, or would have to show the other side as if there's another, you know what I mean? So I felt that there was not anything fair out there, right. Honestly. I mean, there might be. I mean, I didn't, I haven't seen every single film in the world, but I just thought that those were all somewhat disrespectful. So I attempted to not do that.
Right. No, you absolutely did not do that. You absolutely went very, very much the high objective road with it. And I mean, projects like this are plagued, or I guess I would say opportunities for film portrayal of people who follow these ideas are plagued by interests that are that don't want it to be rational, that want it to be like kind of crazy and sensational, or they just want to condemn it. They just want to paint it in the worst light possible and use it as like scare propaganda, basically. Well, so I mean, it's just so refreshing to see yours. And another thing about the film that I really liked is the way you incorporate his artwork into the storyline of it, which is very much, I mean, it makes a commentary on the idea that Setian practice is a creative act itself,
Yeah, definitely, and that was his form of expression. And I would be, it would be a sad film not to include his art, because oh my God, his art was amazing. And there's a great story, and it didn't end up in the cut, but he ended up. The reason he started carving was at the end of his owning the bookstore. He knew he had to sell the bookstore and move on. This guy owed him a bunch of money, and so. But he couldn't pay James, and so instead he gave James this big chunk of mammoth ivory. And so James had this mammoth ivory, and he's looking and he's like, you know what? Fuck it, I'm going to become a carver. And so he took that and sort of went on his way and learned how, sort of self-taught, but he also did some work with some Inuit carvers up in the high north, and learned what he could, and just made these beautiful things, like these amazing sculptures. I actually own one, and I'm really happy that I have that, because it's just this piece that, the beautiful thing about stone and bone and this type of material is that it's going to last. Mm-hmm. It's going to have this somewhat of an immortality, at least for, within the way humans' lifespans are. That piece I have of his is going to last longer than the paintings I own and things like that. So I just love that. Bits of him are out there, and they're just going to last forever and ever. Mm-hmm. So, well, yeah. And he's so talented. Like, he had just a natural, innate talent, an ability to render an image out of whatever it is he was working with. I don't think I saw a piece of his art that I didn't like, didn't find something beautiful resonating in it. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, his artwork, I feel his artwork is just a wonderful synthesis of, it has sort of that raw desire of, black magic and the left-hand path sort of like fused with the rawness and the visceralness of like the natural environment that he arose in the Yukon. So it's like so many of his works are just, they're real, like, they just have this abrasiveness to them that really reflects that sort of feeling. I got a couple of things. So he made for the Esoteric Order of Beelzebub, which is an order of the Temple of Set that I'm involved with. He designed and physically made the medallions, specialized medallions for us, which I don't have one here right now. I'd show it to you, but it's
I know what it looks like.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And so he made them for everyone who wanted one. He made one unique, like slightly different. Like each one is like slightly different. And those who got them from him are very fortunate that they have them now. But again, it's just that visceralness, that ruggedness of how it's like put together. And it's sharp, it's like a really sharp like thing. It's like it can be painful if you slept on it. You don't want to sleep on it because you might cut yourself in the middle of the night because it's pretty rough.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to wear those carefully.
Yeah.
And, no, totally. But the other thing about James is that he does have that, he's a rugged mountain man. Like, he said, he's like, I could, go out, live in the bush, zipper an animal, like nobody's business. Like he's okay on his own. But he actually had a very delicate and also very humorous side that if you didn't know him and you only knew of his reputation, when you encountered that, you'd be like, whoa, night and day, right? Because he's so funny. Like he was so funny. I don't think I ever had a conversation with him where at least one point of the conversation, something humorous passed between us and I would laugh out loud from my gut. He just had this way about him that, he could be really rough and really like, but then there's that funny side where he could just pull something out and just make you laugh. And if you thought that you were sad or like, he would pull you back. And so I just love that about him.
Yeah.
I really miss, driving past where he lived. Every time I drive past there, because I was doing work with another filmmaker in the same area, I just, have this regret going, it's too bad James isn't, because if he was in after this meeting, I would pop by his house and drop in and have a conversation. I would, go and talk to James just like I did as a teenager. I was like, I almost saw the film talking to James, but that's more personal between like the way I saw him, so yeah.
So, what has the response been like with the film? I know you had this film festival, and I've seen a couple of. I think I saw a private link that was shared once, and then I saw it played at a gathering in Prague last year. What has it been like? What's the response been like? What have you been getting with?
Well, it's interesting. Every time I screen it, I have like a section of the audience that comes to me afterwards and talks about how that's how I feel about things, or I've been looking into this stuff and can you give me direction? And they want me to give them sort of advice on, magical advice or, that sort of thing where I'm like, actually here are some website addresses. This is the resource. I just made the film, but a lot of people are getting inspired and they get excited. But then a lot of people are really freaked out by it, like so freaked out. And there's nothing scary in it. I did have one, I submitted it to this festival in Spain that had this write-up that sounded like, oh, this film's perfect for that festival. It's like for filmmakers doing independent works that are outside the norm. So I submitted it, and then a few weeks later, I started getting like harassed online by these random people telling me how I'm, I don't know, there's some really funny quotes I can't pull off the top of my head right now, but basically that I'm gonna be hurting juvenile, like youth, with my work, and that, you know, I'm inviting Satan in or something like that. And it was just pretty awful. And I was like, God, I didn't, well, I was warned that it could happen, but I didn't really expect it. But I found out later on it was the director of the film festival who had sent his staff to attack me because they were very Catholic and were offended that I had sent my film for consideration into the festival, even though it didn't say anywhere on their description that it was like, you know, we only like, you know, Christian normative, you know, whatever, Abrahamic religious style films. And if your film falls outside of that, then we're going to attack you. Like, so that was pretty brutal. Yeah. I find when I have an audience, the audience likes it. But finding the audience in the mainstream has been difficult. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's okay, because I think what I ended up, like, I was thinking about the project, and I realized I didn't really make this project necessarily for the mainstream. I made it accessible for the mainstream, but actually made it for people on the path, regardless if they were Setians or some other group that they're following, or individuals, or for people who maybe have no idea about any path, but are just, you know, just like pretty artwork, you know. So I made it for people like that, and that's okay. I mean, I'm happy that the audience it's not as large, but it's very receptive and very excited about it, which is nice.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So this is another point about the film that I will note, is that there is no like recruitment aspect to it. This isn't like watching like a Scientology, you know, a short Scientology film, or a Latter-day Saints, or, you know, anything like that. There's no recruitment aspect. There's no, hey, this guy's in this religion and you need to join that religion right away. No, it's just this is a story about an individual who has found, you know, who found some ideas and is applying those ideas in a certain way in his life, but then his own life and his own creativity is like welling up and coloring all of this also. So it would be, I think, informative to someone who just has no clue about the left-hand path, or no background, or nothing to compare this to. I think someone like that would find it informative and revealing, yet no one would feel like threatened that they're being that it has like this recruitment aspect to it. And I think that's a good thing for the film, because that's going to allow it to go that much further. Which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, like that would be kind of, I think if I did that, would be somewhat just honest too, and then it would fall outside of what I was trying to accomplish, which is a documentary more so than an industrial promotional video or that sort of thing. I wouldn't ever want to be part of a project that had that element to it, because I didn't find that when I did my research in the temple, my research with a lot of the authors that James had in his shelves. So I'd see what he had, and then I'd read their books, or I'd research and stuff, and I didn't find any of that kind of like cult style recruitment, or like you're drinking the Kool-Aid to belong to this group. Like, I found that it was quite interesting. The way he described it was, it's like a university where you come in and you take a couple courses and you join some special interest groups and you have a good time, you learn stuff. And if you want to continue on and work in the administration, you can. If you want to continue on and become a professor, you can. But you could also just continue on with your life and take what you've learned and apply it to yourself as an individual. So that's what I really appreciate about that, because it was really up to the individual to decide what they wanted to do with it. And if it was anything other than that, then it would be a big fat lie, I think, for what the philosophy is. If they were trying to do anything other than that, then you're something else. You're not, I don't think it would be a left-hand path situation. Be more along the lines of, an Abrahamic religion, possibly.
Well, yeah. I mean, to me, that's how I conceive of the term right-hand path, is that it involves coercion. There's a coercive aspect to it. There's like a force aspect. There's like a there's a standard for behavior that needs to be adhered to by everyone who is involved in it, and everyone should be involved in it, is kind of the idea behind it. Whereas, like, to me, the left-hand path is really, it refers to an individual pursuit. And it's a path. It's a path in the sense that people like that it's active. It's not just doing. It's not the same thing as just doing whatever in your life, and just whatever. No, it's not that. It's an actual path. It's focused. It's trying to achieve something in a spiritual sense, or in an awareness kind of sense. And there's an exchange with other people that are trying to do that. But it's a voluntary. It's a voluntary effort. It's a voluntary personal effort to pursue this path, and it's a voluntary effort to exchange with other people that are doing it, and there's no coercive aspect at all. And this all comes, in my opinion, this all comes through on your film too. Just the context of the film is like it's one guy, it's one individual talking about his experience of how he did this. It's not a portrait of a group, right? Where when they come in with cameras and they like film like a religious group, comes off like much differently. It all becomes about us, we, and whatnot. So the way your film represents that, I think this is why it just totally grooves with the whole concept of left-hand path, and that's the name of the movie too. So it fits right in.
Well, yeah, and I think when I put that name, I was thinking I might being bold to use that because it's such a big term. It can encompass a lot of different organizations. But I did that on purpose to introduce the concept of left-hand path to a mainstream audience, because it's something that people don't know about. They don't, you're a regular mainstream individual who is likely, well, maybe a little religious or was raised a bit, but they don't practice, or atheists. They don't necessarily know that there is this grouping, or there are different ways of thinking about these sorts of things, and there's organizations out there. So I thought naming it that way would at least give people an idea of something to look up and possibly more about if they were interested. It's really because this is all, this is about James himself and his belief system and what he did. So So I am just the control camera on his life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where when did you find out about that he was going to pass away? How did that knowledge come to you? Was it like?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Sure. Well, we filmed over the solstice weekend. Or sorry, it's not the weekend. It was just during a work week. But the solstice 2017, and then the day after was a Friday. And we had our party, we did some filming. You see the fire at the end or whatever. We did some filming, and then we had our little party, and then it was fine. And then he didn't feel very well the next day, but he attributed it to just the all the stuff we were doing. And then it was a month after that he got diagnosed with what he was diagnosed with, and then he found out that it was terminal, and so yeah. And it was like you said, the day after he felt bad, and then he continued to feel bad, and he had no energy. So we had captured him at the zenith, at the very final moments you could possibly get him looking healthy and looking without all that energy that he put out while we filmed. I mean, we didn't have crazy long film days. I think that's cruel to do unless you really, really need to. I like keeping my days, regular work days. Maybe up to 10 hours the most, but so we weren't going too nuts in terms of that, but yeah, it was the zenith. So these are the last kind of, and it is true, it's like the last moments that he looked healthy and was healthy. So I don't know, I think there's some alignment or some sort of long desire playing out in the whole making of this project, the whole way it came around, because I'm not necessarily very, I'm an outgoing person in small groups, but I'm not I need the spotlight on me all the time, and I was afraid of public speaking, but using this project idea to do the pitch thing and then winning the money, that was just really unusual for me to do that. And then yeah. And then years before, getting the courage to ask James if he wanted to be part of this project, because I wasn't sure how he'd react. And then he was really positive. It was like the opposite of what I expected. So all of these things sort of just came together and happened over time. Yeah. And then the reason we chose that weekend is it was the actual 42nd anniversary of the Temple of Set. So in 1975, those 2 days, Michael Aquino had invoked the Dark Prince. And so what we wanted to do was have James make a piece of art or jewelry or something over the 42nd anniversary of that event to be part of, so that we could tie in his art and his religion into the story. And so that was sort of the premise of that. It was also the only time I could get my camera guy and my sound guy, because my camera guy was working on another project. And so, so he's like, yeah, I'm good on those 2 days. I'm like, or those 3 days. And that was great. So I could schedule him in. And so it was like one of those things where the stars just aligned. So everyone's available. And yeah, that was, that was pretty intense. It was really, really intense to realize that, oh my God, this is, but he got to see it. He saw every single cut I did. I did the assembly. I'd show him the assembly. I did the rough cut. I showed him the rough cut. Got to the fine cut, and he would give me feedback if I needed it. But he was mostly very keen. He's like, "It's your project, Jessica. You do with it whatever you want." Well, actually, he said he can do whatever the F you want to do with it. It's James, right? Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Oh no, it's all very magical, like how it all, hearing you reveal some of the details about this just fits right in, because where I'm at, looking at it all from a distance, it's all clearly pretty magical, and a lot of synchronicity going on with it. And one thing you mentioned about him, about how his outgoingness and his attitude, was that when he because when I found out that he was had cancer and he was going to pass away, and then I spoke to him and we ended up doing an interview on the podcast and everything, and all those times when I spoke to him throughout all that, right up to the very end, he was so positive. He was so confident. He was just so empowered. And I mean, that's part of it too. The way I feel, the way people carry themselves through these intense crises like that, say so much. Well, I don't know, crisis is the right word, but you know what I mean. It's pretty heavy, right? And to carry yourself through that with that sort of courage and honesty and just truthfulness about it. He's just honest about the fact. No, I'm gonna die and I'm ready. I'm ready to go. It's like we're gonna do this, and that's just so inspiring. And I can't help it. Every time I see the film, I can't help but think of it in terms of that. It's like this film is like it's carrying forth this kind of message. It's carrying forth his kind of attitude on into it. So let me ask you this then: what kind of change do you hope that the film brings some kind of change out there?
Well, it sort of already has, and at least in my hometown, which, although honestly, Whitehorse is a really great place to live because we're open-minded. You're still going to have people who aren't, but for the most part, I think on average, it's a lot more open-minded than other parts of the world, other parts of Canada. It's just weird. You're in the north, I think it's because it's a small population. You're kind of stuck with everybody, so you sort of have to let everyone's picadillos and whatever personality traits and stuff. You just have to accept it because you don't have that much choice. So it's sort of ingrained. Whitehorse is open-minded. We did. For example, we pitched an art show. I was involved in a group show recently about shadow work. It's called What We Become in the Shadows. And I was working with Claire Strauss. She did ceramics. Joshua Lesage, he did some carving. And Bianca Martin, who was a student of James, and she did some ceramics and some carving and some lithographs and other items. And we put together a group show in January. And part of it, we dedicated a quarter to James, where I built a little TV transmitter analog station out of a trunk and sent the signal up through his massive inverted Setian pentagram, so that it would hit these 60s style television sets that didn't have any other input. So you'd be like, how is the signal getting in there? Seriously sent this like loose antenna right up the pentagram. It was hilarious. So downtown Whitehorse, in this massive art show, we have this like, you know, this little corner with this huge pentagram and altar, and then on the set was the interview I had originally done with James in 2013, where it's just sort of a locked off camera, and he's just talking to me. It's like so you're sitting and talking to James. It's like you're sitting in his place because you're in his fugly chair, and across this chair from you is this old TV set, and there's James telling you all about everything. And so that was an installation we did as part of the show, and it went over so well. Like, our Whitehorse loved it. People were saying it was like the best art show they'd seen at the Arts Underground space in a long time. They felt as a group show, we really tied everything together, and we had all of these great compliments. And so it was really nice to do something like that, to honor James in such a, because he was an artist, he was part of the arts community as well. And yeah, so it's gone, so in a sense, it kind of, because it's accessible, and anyone watching it without an idea of Satanism, left-hand path, religions and philosophies, you know, even Church of Satan stuff, without any knowledge of it, they go, whoa, what is this? And then they often will look it up and then go, wait a minute, I thought it was this thing. And then it sort of opens their minds, even just a little bit. So I like that. I like to kind of change the narrative that that's sort of plagued anyone that's not practicing a Christian religion. It's just, yeah. So that's one thing I like about it. But that art show, that was so much fun. So much fun. I think James would have really appreciated the fact that I had sent the video signal to the television sets via very high frequency analog waves. So if you're sitting there, the kind of the waves are like kind of going through you. So James is sort of like going through you. That was the idea. Well, I don't know if that really, that was my, like, you know, you have these concepts and then your execution, you're like, But yeah, people really enjoyed it. So that was fun.
Picking up Kirby vibrations.
Yeah, and so we do have this extra footage, James, that's pretty amazing, even though it's not like in any kind of cinematic sense, like a piece of cinema. It's just an excellent interview. And I will be putting it on a DVD, so I will have a DVD version with all of these book stuff. Yeah, at some point. Well, I'm working on it to have it finished for March, and then I'll figure out how I'm going to roll that out later on. But I think a lot of people would really want to see this, especially if you're into if you knew James, yes, and if you're into the same philosophy as he is, then yes as well, because he was a powerhouse.
So I wonder if I've seen some of this. Is it black and white?
Yeah.
Okay, and he's just kind of sitting there talking, and
I pulled a segment out for one of the screenings because I wanted to give a gift to people so that they could see, get a sense of a piece of the story that they might not have known from his mouth. Which, yeah.
Awesome. So that's your next. So then is that going to eventually be a released film also?
Yeah, that one I'm going to be putting on the DVD as a bonus. So the DVD is close to being finished, and then I'm going to add that. The reason I'm a little behind is part of it was the year after James passed away. It was difficult for me to figure out, like, work on promoting a film about him. It felt wrong. I felt like I needed to leave some space. So aside from sending it to certain festivals that are far away, I wanted to kind of have a smaller, like, not do too much until after a year. For some reason, that just felt right to me, out of respect for James and his family. Yeah. And then they're like, well, why aren't you doing anything? I'm like, well, because I don't feel right. So I have to feel, and I think that's part of it. It's just, I've been doing these things based on my own instinct. And so if this is what I was meant to do it this way, then I think that I was meant to be a little delayed in putting this stuff together. So, yeah, but I'll be getting it out there. And then I might release some stuff online, but I'll just take a look at it. I kind of like it being part of people's collections and not being part of the interwebs.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see where I go. And I always consult with his partner and with his family before I do any kind of anything with a project. Even though James said I could do whatever I wanted, I do that out of respect because it's his family and they're awesome people, and I want them to be on board with what I do with this project.
Absolutely.
Moving forward.
So that was going to be my other question then. So there is plans to eventually have a DVD so people can purchase this.
Yeah, and March 15th is my deadline for. I'll have a kind of a limited run then, and we'll see what the interest is, and then I might do a bigger run.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to getting it out there more and sharing, because that's what James wanted. The reason he wanted to do this project is he wanted to get out there. He wanted to change Canada. He had big plans, and if I can help him in any small way with what I did with him in the project, then I'm going to help him do that, because I just think his whole approach is just nice, and it, no matter how you feel, no matter what religious belief you have or philosophy you follow, what he talks about is, I think, kind of universal, that anyone can get something out of it. And for me, just as someone who's really big on the individual, it's just, I always found him reassuring, and it's like, yeah, awesome. It's okay to be yourself. It's okay to refine who you are moving forward in your life. So, it's pretty awesome.
So have you ever seen that movie Big Fish? It's like a Tim Burton film.
Yeah.
Where it's like about this guy and his father. His father passed away, and he's going to his father's funeral, and he's like remembering his father used to tell all these stories, and he thought, he was just lying and making up like all this bullshit. And then his father finally dies, and he like goes to the funeral, and there's like hundreds of people at the funeral, and they're all people from the stories that he was telling, right? That he has, stories about weird twins and and midgets and all crazy people and stuff like that, like Addams Family, type characters and stuff. And it's like I get this same feeling with Kirby, because I mean, he told stories like all these things. Like when you talk about the bookstore, you talk about things at Whitehorse, and it's like, I heard stories about these things, right? I heard stories about them for years, and they're kind of like a mythology. And then now he's gone, and now all these people are like arising, are coming, appearing with this, with their testimonies about how it's all true. He lived in this little house. He had a huge library. He had a bookstore. It's all true. So it's like, it's weird.
Yeah, he was a chef. He actually cooked a meal for our Prime Minister back in the day. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But the current Prime Minister?
No, this is like three Prime Ministers back.
Okay.
But yeah, no, he did a lot of stuff.
Wow. He definitely got around.
Yeah, no, he had a lot of friends. Lots of people loved and admired him in our town, and of course everywhere else. Because I've been meeting people that he's known through this project, so kind of the reverse. And it's like, oh, this is great. So I met this one guy whose piece of art I filmed in the project, so I got to talk to him and this other person, and so it's been kind of fun too, because of the stories he would tell me, and I get to meet the people behind those.
Wow.
Or the people finally introduce themselves, because they might not have been named by name. They might have been just part of, anyway. But, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you're going to be at the Black Flame PDX Festival in Portland, right, in April?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
And we're going to be screening these films there?
Yes, I'm going to screen the film and hopefully a couple other little pieces to tie into it. So some additional material that you might not have seen. So
okay.
Yeah. If
awesome.
If I have time, I will definitely do that. I'm looking forward to screening it again to another audience that I know will be appreciative of the content.
That's awesome. So I gotta ask you this. So who's your, as a filmmaker, and so not a lot of people know this, but when I went to college, I took a minor in film studies, and I made a little independent film and stuff like that. And there was a point in my life where I applied for jobs to get internships in Hollywood at different Hollywood studios. And while I was like doing this process of doing, and this is pre-internet, so it's like you had to like send letters out through the mail and wait to hear back and everything. And then I got interested in other things, and I went a different direction. There's one point in my life where I almost went that direction, but I get so interested in hearing the mechanics about behind how these things are made, and what the vision is behind them is always a great interest. So I wanted to ask then, who is your favorite director?
I used to say Gus Van Sant back in the day, and still one of my favorite from back in the day, but I don't really have one. I like so many different films and directors and styles that I could say my favorite Canadian filmmaker, because his films are so freaking weird, and I got to meet him once, and he's also freaking weird, is Guy Maddin. Experimental film, like just so odd and fantastic that you watch his films and you're like, what did I just watch?
Wow.
Yeah. So Guy Maddin would be up there for sure, but I wouldn't say he's like my absolute favorite. But yeah, I have so many favorites. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, who's your favorite?
So I'm somewhere between Stanley Kubrick, John Carpenter, and John Huston. Oh, I like old films. I mean, I don't think there's any good movies coming out anymore. I think it's fucking over with Hollywood. They can't do it anymore. The machine just can't function. They can't come up with new stuff anymore. They make that. I hate superheroes. In the 90s, I was like probably the biggest fan of the X-Men. I had all these X-Men comics. Now it makes me sick. I haven't even seen the last few X-Men movies. I don't even care anymore. It's like CGI has destroyed it, It's just ridiculous. So more and more I find myself going back, to the pre-70s really. I feel like the 70s era, they got really obsessed with like realism and stuff like that. But there's some great, Kubrick stuff that comes out during the 70s, but really like I like going back to the 40s, 50s, 30s, like that kind of era, like noir film. I like that.
Yeah, there's good ones. I agree with you, but what's really funny that you mentioned superheroes is one of the scenes that I'm putting together for the DVD is a scene where James is working on this ring, and it's his own version of the Punisher, and it's just like the most wicked, heaviest, gruesome Punisher skull ever.
Wow.
He loves the Punisher. And he has this great story around it. So and that was a piece I did in 2014 because I was like testing the waters, like how is James going to be on camera when I'm filming him? Can he like work on stuff and talk at the same time? Because some people can't, right? Some people like me will talk with their hands and they can't actually do work. Oh no, but he can do both. So I shot this little scene and it was great. Awesome. And I used it in my pitch reel later on. So when I was pitching the project, So excellent. He loved the Punisher, but he liked the version with Dolph Lundgren. That was his favorite.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just kind of funny because, but there you go.
Just the more these superhero movies come out, the more I have an appreciation for Christopher Reeve in the 1970s version of Superman. I think that's just probably the best. Like, I go back and watch that now, and I'm like, this is like so good. This is so powerful. They just they can't do it anymore. Everything's so bam, bam, and just so much razzmatazz and CGI craziness in it that I just can't follow it. So.
Yeah. Well, there's local festivals for independent films. That's where you're going to find those stories you're looking for.
Uh-huh.
You're not going to find them in Hollywood. You might find one or two in Hollywood here and there, but you're mostly going to find them at those small festivals in your hometown. Made by, small budgets, but good acting.
Yeah.
These unknown filmmakers whose stories are just as relevant or just as important to see So I always encourage people to do that. Go and check something out that you wouldn't normally see, because you might be surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So do you consider yourself exclusively like a documentarian, or can you do narrative films? Do you look forward to doing that, or have you done them, or anything like that?
You know what? I like documentary, and I think documentary is my style. I'm not against doing a narrative, but the narrative that I've done was a mock documentary. So, I think I'm really just in the documentary realm. But I like experimental, so I'm looking at other ways of doing experimental that are not just interesting to other experimental filmmakers, but experimental films that are accessible to the public. Because you go and see one and you're like, yeah, I can see people getting super irritated right now. And because I'm watching it and I'm looking for certain things, but other people are like, Jessica, why do you like this? I'm like, I don't know, because I'm weird. But yeah, so experimental and documentary for sure. Those are kind of what I just sort of where I seem to go and what I want to do. And I want to explore more in this realm, because I think this is a story, or this is an area that's not really explored properly. And it'd be nice to kind of do more work that talks about alternative ways of living, alternative ways of thinking that have existed and that get hammered on quite a bit by powers that be and why. Yeah.
There was a time with documentary where the angle was to keep it kind of clinical and kind of removed from it. Like, you're kind of like, pretend like the camera's not really here, and filming people in their natural habitat, as it were. And one thing I think that Left Hand Path does is that it gives you a feeling for it at the same time, right? It's like you're not clinically like removed from it, like, here's the study and here's what he does. No, it's like you're kind of in the mode. It kind of gets you the feeling of it, and the everything about it, the color and the design and the composition and everything gets you in the feeling of like being there with it. And that's like a really effective way of presenting ideas like this that a lot of people are probably not familiar with. And as well, you see the way it shows Kirby, like I think there's a scene where he's like making coffee or something like that, so it's like it's really clear this is also a human being, right? This is not some Azrael, the demon of darkness in his cavern, communicating to you psychically from somewhere. No, this is like a real person. This is a real guy. This is his life, and his life is this artwork, and it's this dark aesthetic, and it's this philosophy, and it's this act of creation that is just threaded throughout it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, James and his dark aesthetic. And then sometimes when you come over and he's wearing he's wearing these like really loud clothes that just like don't fit in the environment. It's so much fun. Yeah. He had, I miss him. I miss him a lot. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well,
we
lost. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, we just really lost, just somebody who I think is extremely powerful and had a lot to give the world, and as long as the world was receptive to it, Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that you are facilitating the continuance of that. What you're doing with this film is allowing that to continue in some sense. The vibrations that he's created, the ideas, the presence of Kirby is still, it's vibrating out there into the world, and you're helping to facilitate that and make that happen. So I think that's a good.
Thank you. Thank you very much.